you're in a race to run against Joe Biden to be the next president of the United States. Does this muddy the waters? Does this help the Republican cause to launch an impeachment inquiry without a vote?
Well, it all depends on where it goes and what the foundation and the facts are. But, in the history of impeachments has not gone well in terms of the Senate having any interest in it, of convicting a president. And here, our focus is the election. Joe Biden is wrong on his policies, energy policy. His decisions is hurting America and our growth. His spending policy, the Bidenomics. I mean, these are the issues that I get asked about. Nobody's come up to me and talking about the Trump legal cases. Nobody's coming up to me and, a few of them do talk about, from the Republican standpoint, the Biden's and Hunter's and his legal difficulties.
Right.
But we got to get to the facts in the long term. Let's see where those facts take us.
So when we're thinking about the pursuing of yet another impeachment against the U.S. president, potentially a precedent being set here, given former President Trump in the prior administration was also impeached on multiple occasions, then the prospect of the government shutting down broadly for the Republican Party, what does this signal about its health and its ability going into 2024 to message the right things to the American people?
Well, it's a challenging and unpredictable political environment. You overlay what you just said with 4 indictments against former President Trump. And Kevin McCarthy's in a difficult position, as everyone knows, and so you give him a little latitude. He's trying to avoid a shutdown. He's trying to get the appropriation bills, the budget bills through. Now, impeachment is not something that constitutionally should be bargained with. And I believe you ought to get the facts. I don't like labeling it as an impeachment inquiry. It ought to be a factual inquiry. The public needs to have confidence that the former Vice President Biden and President Biden was not receiving benefit from foreign governments. That's something that ought to be cleared up. And President Biden has been somewhat mum on that topic, so he's not clearing it up. And so the facts ought to be out there, but it ought to be a preliminary inquiry. Impeachment's not something that ought to be used in the normal course of affairs in Congress.
So you support the probe or the inquiry as a matter of principle?
I do. Okay. I do.
We don't want to spend the whole interview with you on this, by the way. We like to talk policy at Bloomberg. Let's dare to dream about policy for a moment, Governor, because I think someone like yourself just indicated you'd like to make this race about the economy. And we talk about this all day long around here as we prepare for what could be another Federal Reserve interest rate hike, the next meeting this week. The market doesn't seem to know what to do about that. I wonder your thoughts on the Fed and whether you would keep Jay Powell on the job as chairman.
Well, of course, he has a term, but I would like to see a new leader into the Fed.
Yeah.
And if I can do that as president, and I can, I would want to do that.
You'd fire him?
I would fire him. And the reason is that he has raised interest rates at the wrong time. I think it's been more aggressive than what needed to be. He probably started too late on it. And it's really hurting our families. And I think you also had forestalled and been clear that we're going to stop doing these rate increases. I think that would be the right signal for American businesses and our families that are worrying about their credit card debt, new families trying to get into a new home. And I talked yesterday in Savannah, Georgia, to a young mom who I said, "What's the big issue to you?" And she says, "I just want to raise my kids in a safe environment and where we can afford to buy milk at the store." And that's what's on the Americans' minds. And so it starts with controlling spending. You have to worry about the supply chain. The UAW strike that's threatened, that's coming up, is not going to be helping the economic situation. And so as president, I would call in the Fed. I would believe that the president can communicate and express his opinion as to what should be done, just like we do in a whole host of other issues.
So in terms of what the Fed should be doing, do you think the dual mandate should still be a dual mandate, that they have to equally weigh full employment in the U.S. economy and inflation, or should one take greater focus?
Well, I think that inflation should be, the controlling factor for them. The unemployment, that's what the President of the United States worries about. That's what Congress worries about. As governor, I looked at that unemployment rate every week every month that it was released, and we acted on it, and we created jobs, 100,000 jobs while I was governor. And so, no, I don't believe that that should be in the decision-making process of the Federal Reserve. Control inflation, watch the monetary supply that's out there, and that should be the focus.
You mentioned the UAW. We could be looking at a massive auto strike in just 2 days. I wonder how you would handle this if you were the president, if you would get involved. This White House so far has not. The union has not indicated that it would like any help with mediation. But this is an emboldened time for organized labor after the deal we saw with UPS, now a request for a 46% wage increase, a 32-hour work week. Should the President of the United States have a say in this?
The President has to always worry about the economy, about the broader national security and production capability. And so, but it also should be reserved until absolutely necessary. These are negotiations between a union and the employer, and they need to try to resolve it. The Federal Labor Relations Law makes it clear that if they can't resolve that, you've got choices. Employees, the unions can strike, and employers can replace. And that's the tension, that's a balance that we've had. But if it gets to a particular point in time where the president can be useful in resolving that conflict, he ought to insert himself. But the time is not right for that, and that should be reserved.
So we are looking at a deadline in 2 days for that contract expiring. You, though, sir, are looking at a different kind of deadline a few weeks out. The second primary debate, September 27th. You need 3% in the polls to get there. I believe to this point you have not yet qualified. If you don't do so, would you follow the lead of, say, Francis Suarez and leave the race?
Well, I'm not going to set timelines and specific criteria for it. But whenever you look at the polls, there's two criteria for being on the debate. One is 3% of the polls. We have made one poll nationally at 3%, and so we need one more, or some early state polls. And so we're optimistic that we're going to get there. And then secondly, our donor base, and we're going to make that. And so I plan on being at that debate. Nothing would mean more to me than to be at the Reagan Library as somebody that was appointed by Ronald Reagan as the youngest U.S. attorney in the nation years ago. And so I expect to be there. We got a little work to do to get there. And so if anybody calls you in a poll, please answer Asa Hutchinson.